County Board Wrap-Up. I'm Mary Curtius from the Office of Communications. With me here again today is Mary Hynes, the County Board Chair. Welcome, Mary.
Hi, Mary.
Thank you so much for joining us again today.
Absolutely.
I look really forward to this chat on what happened at the County Board meeting.
Yep.
Each month, following the County Board meetings, we're taking a half hour to talk about some of the actions the Board took and what those actions mean for you, your family, and your community, so you can stay informed about what your government is doing and why. And Mary, you're here to help us sort the whole thing out. The first thing I wanted to ask you about is what was of particular interest and particular importance about this meeting?
Well, you know, in April every year we finish up our budget planning for the next year. So we adopted on Tuesday night the fiscal year 2016 total budget. So we finished it up.
And what does that mean, fiscal year 2016?
Well, the county's fiscal year starts July 1st and it runs through June 30th. And so we call it the fiscal year instead of the calendar year, so we all know what we're talking about.
And when did this budget planning actually start?
You know, we start planning for the next one almost as soon as we finish the one we just adopted. The formal start of it really begins in the fall of each year, when the county board gives direction to the county manager about things like whether or not we're willing for her to build her budget around increased taxes or not. Sometimes we give direction about how we want to approach what's going on with schools. Sometimes we know we have new facilities opening, like in 2016 we'll finally get our homeless services center back up and running. That has budget implications. So that's the first step, is sometime in the fall, usually October, November, we give that kind of direction.
So what goes into your giving her those directions? Are you basing that on what? On what kind of information?
So staff does a really great job of sort of tracking what's going on financially. Our biggest source of revenue is real estate, both commercial and residential. And so they track trends, they look at sales, and they'll come to us in the fall with a guess, an early estimate, if you will, of how much growth we might expect, both in commercial and residential, and they do behave differently. We also have business and professional and other license tax, which is another big pot of money that comes off businesses, as well as the personal property tax that most of us pay for our cars.
And in broad strokes, what kind of guidance did you give her this time?
Well, we asked her to bring us a budget with no tax increase. That was perhaps the most important message that we sent. We asked her to meet our revenue sharing principles with the school system, which basically sets out an initial split of the money, and then the principals say, and we're going to keep talking throughout the budget process until we get to the end to sort of figure out if we need to adjust how that revenue is split. And this year we did, actually. We added about 0.6%, about $19 million more is going to go to schools for fiscal year 16 than they have this year in fiscal year 15.
As far as you were concerned at that point, did you think this was going to be a tough budget year?
To tell you the truth, Mary, this is my 8th county budget. I have 12 school board budgets under my belt, but my 8th county budget, none of them has been easy since I came here, because the economic downturn happened the fall of 2008. And so we have been dealing in a circumstance where initially our economy did okay because the federal government was really playing. But in more recent years, it's been really difficult. So we've been scaling back, and we've been trimming, and we've been trying to adjust. And we've been doing this in an environment where school enrollment is growing. So I don't think any of them actually are easy. They all involve choices, because what we're hearing from our residents, given the sequester and shutting down and no increases in salaries, is that more taxes are a challenge for them.
Okay, and then I guess that kind of answers my next question. How do you decide each year what you're going to spend? Do you look at your revenues and say, this is how much we have to spend? Or do you look at your services and programs and say, this is what we have to cover, we have to figure out a way to cover it?
It's a blend.
Okay.
It's really a blend of those two things. And because we hold in our hands the tool that lets you align revenue with what you need to do, which is the tax rate. You come in, I think, with some thought of how much you might be willing to go. And actually, you know, we after the manager's budget is presented, we actually advertise what can be the top amount of revenue we could raise when we advertise the tax rate. Can't go higher than that, can always go lower. So we have that tool, but we spend a lot of time pushing the manager, looking for savings, examining how we do our business, and then quite honestly, because of school's growth, that becomes the other big piece of the conversation.
So would you say that was one of the big challenges this year, how to deal with that growth?
Absolutely. When we started in the fall, the schools said they needed another $26 million. By the time we got to the last week, they were down at 6.2, and we were able to find the 6.2. They did a lot of good work on their side to look for streamline, to look at pots of money and make some really what I thought were very strategic choices on their part. And we did the same thing on our side then to try to meet a dollar amount we thought we could.
So you give this guidance to the manager. What does the manager then do? And when does it finally come back to you?
Sure. So what she does is she talks to all the departments. You know, she kind of takes that guidance out and says, oh, they said no tax increase, so we're going to kind of, here's our box we have to live in. And we asked her this year as well to bring us a 1% reduction, so about $4 million of reduction, not to take them, but to bring them to us so we would have, if we needed to, because we knew about schools, we had some places we could look at that had been vetted by the organization. She also generally has been collaborating with the superintendent to hold a community meeting. She met with all of our commissions to hear what they had to say. And then she and sort of the executive leadership team here at the county go into mode of putting the budget together. That happens all the way through January. Typically the budget comes to the board then as the manager's proposed budget in February of each year. And then we have to advertise that tax rate, and then we move into hefty work sessions to understand the proposals.
So you're going through the whole budget?
Absolutely, every department, every single year.
Well, it sounds like that's a really involved and very public process you just went through to put together the budget.
It sure is, and it should be.
It absolutely should be. Okay, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll learn exactly how much the board has budgeted for FY 2016 and whether or not you'll be paying more taxes.
Anywhere you drive in Arlington, you'll encounter county work crews who are outperforming daily tasks like cleaning streets, collecting leaves, or plowing snow. Driving safely around these vehicles is extremely important to avoid accidents or injuries. Trucks do not have the same stop-and-go capability as cars. Therefore, here are some safety tips our Department of Environmental Services would like you to remember. Please slow down around work zones and provide county vehicles and personnel additional space needed to safely operate. Trucks have blind spots between the doors and the rear of the vehicle. Stay out of these areas to ensure you are seen. Do not pull in front of a truck when you need to stop or slow down. Be sure to signal your intentions and do not make moves abruptly. When parking, be sure to park as close to the curb as possible. Most importantly, practice patience. Be a pal, predictable, alert, and lawful, and don't zone out. Finally, if you encounter unsafe behaviors from a county truck driver, report it to our risk management office at 703-228-4444.
Welcome back to County Board Wrap-Up with Mary Hynes, who has been explaining the budget process to us. So, Mary, give us the nitty-gritty.
Okay.
What was the bottom line on the FY 2016 budget? How big a budget is it?
Well, it's about almost $1.2 billion, of which 451 and change goes over to the school system to support our incredible education.
That's almost half the budget.
Yeah, a little bit, between a half and a third, absolutely, when you look at the whole thing. So yeah, we value education, and that's one of the things I would say about this budget overall, is it's based on values. You know, you put money into the things that you believe in. That's really the truth of budgets. So we value schools tremendously. The board put some extra money into economic development this year in an effort to sort of move into a new era of how we're going to attract business and differentiate our economy, diversify our economy. We also put money into public safety, more sheriff's deputies, money to support the circuit court, salary supplement for our public defenders, mental health services at the jail, more police details in Clarendon and in Roslyn. And in Roslyn during the day when we've really been having trouble with gridlock down there, so we got more police presence there. Those are really important ones. But we also heard about bikes from the community, and we heard about our fresh air program, the importance of those things as well. So really a live of our values.
So would you say that the public input that went into this budget did affect some of the decisions the board made in the end?
It certainly did. As I said earlier, the manager brought us a budget that was predicated on no tax increase, but she also brought us $4 million worth of potential cuts for us to consider as we're trying to figure out how to cover the schools and do a variety of other things. And some of the things on that cut list, that potential cut list, engendered a huge amount of community support, and the board decided not to cut them. Primary among that programming and construction money for our bicycle and pedestrian programs, and the sustainability work that we do around houses and planning for the future that's kind of encapsulated in our Fresh Air program. We also heard from a lot of people who thought the Animal Welfare League needed another animal control officer, and we funded that as well.
And why was that? Why did they think that we needed another animal control officer?
Well, you know, we have so many people in Arlington, and they certainly do love their pets. And, and we've got a great partner in the Animal Welfare League. And that's actually who hires the animal control officers. And they had been looking at their statistics and the number of calls they were getting, and was really on the rise. And so we really needed another one, and so we funded it.
But you did take some significant cuts too,
We
right?
did, we did. The most obvious cut, obviously, is the closing of Artisphere, the winding down of Artisphere, and the arts programming will be over on June 30th of this year. We've asked the manager to come back to us in June, though, because there's a lease involved in this particular space, and one of the conditions is that we have to pay the sort of operating costs, the utilities and the heat and stuff for another year. So we have to put some more money in, and we're really trying to, we've asked the manager to go look and see if we can find a way to make use of the space, but not as the Artisphere over this period of time that we have to pay for it. And there's some tech companies and some other people who've begun to kind of put some ideas together. We're hopeful that we can get some value for the community over fiscal year 16, either in the tech field or in the marketing of space and stuff. But that was the biggest and I think the hardest for the board members to take.
Well, and with Artisphere closing, how will the county be supporting the arts?
That's a great question. So Artisphere is just a part of what we do. We have a number of other staff who work for cultural affairs, and 3 of the people from Artisphere are going to go back and rejoin that staff. We have a fabulous new director of cultural affairs who's come from a place where they do lots of art out in the community. And so she's got some really neat ideas. And the Arts Commission, working with the department, will be launching a strategic planning process to really figure out where are we going next with the arts. We were also able at the end to add a small amount of additional arts grants money, which supports our local groups. So
the county intends to continue supporting the arts, just in a different way.
Absolutely. And you know, there's a lot of great research that says for every public dollar you put in, you generate $7 of other economic activity when arts venues are working properly. Artisphere wasn't doing that for us. It wasn't likely to do that for us at any given time. But we know that there are thousands of jobs associated with the arts here in Arlington, and that in certain locations it works really well. We're just going to have to keep working at it.
So let me get to what I think is of great interest to a lot of our viewers. the tax rate.
Uh-huh,
So the board decided the tax rate would not go up.
that's right.
Does that mean taxes won't be going up?
Unfortunately, it doesn't mean that because our assessments went up. If you're like me, you know that notice came soon after the first of the year, and probably your land value went up. Your house may not have. So whatever that increase in your assessment, the tax rate will be applied to that as well. So on average, we think that if you live in the average Arlington house, which is about valued at about $600,000, your property taxes will probably go up about $280 next year, or about $23 a month.
So how does our tax rate compare with other tax rates in the region?
We have the lowest tax rate in the region. Sometimes Fairfax City is a tiny bit under us, but I think we're going to be lowest in this year. Most jurisdictions are not raising their rates at this moment. The difference is, and so if you just took a $600,000 house and you plugged in all these various jurisdictions, what their tax rate would cause, you'd pay the least in Arlington for a $600,000 house in Arlington. If you instead put in the average house cost for each of these jurisdictions, so the further out you get, the lower your average cost gets. They have a higher rate, but on a lower value. And so it appears that Arlington, because our house value is among the highest, that our burden is the highest. But I would also say the kinds of services that we get, the kinds of school system that we have, the access to transit, our incredible libraries, our incredible parks. In some ways, you get what you pay for.
Right.
And I think it's great value for Arlingtonians. Those are the decisions we have to make.
Let me just ask you one final question about this. Do you feel good about this budget?
You know, I do feel good about this. I feel better about this particular budget than any of the other 7 I've worked on here at the county. I think it is a really strong balance of our values. I think we were able to do some key things, like, for instance, add bus service on the weekends on Columbia Pike to help people who are bus dependent down there. But we've also kept our commitment to affordable housing. We've made these strategic investments in public safety and economic development. We met the school's request. I think this is a very strong budget.
Mary, thank you so much for highlighting the budget for us and answering our questions today. If you have more questions about how the county's budget is adopted, email them here at atv@arlingtonva.us or tweet them with the hashtag #CountyBoardWrap, and we'll try to answer them next time. We'll take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll talk about other actions the board took at the April meeting. Thank you.
Do you know a volunteer? Do you volunteer? What if I told you that 32% of Arlingtonians volunteer each year? Over 10,000 volunteers donate over 500,000 hours of service to the county government each year. Yes, 500,000 hours. You can accomplish a lot in that time, like provide canine companions to help over 1,000 children improve their reading skills, educate over 2,000 residents about emergency preparedness, mark storm drains on 81 miles of Arlington streets, lead over 13,500 hours of summer camp activities, respond to over 18,000 hours of fire and medical emergencies, deliver and distribute books to over 400 homebound and disabled residents, provide over 700 hours of counseling and service to Arlington entrepreneurs, survey 51 unsheltered homeless adults to identify permanent housing and service needs, maintain 21 art bus stops, teach U.S. history and civics to 126 adults in preparation for the U.S. citizenship exam. In all, the time that volunteers contribute is worth over $10 million each year to county government programs and our community. Now, it's time for you to get involved. Connect with Volunteer Arlington and find an opportunity to make a difference in your community. Any amount of time and talent can help shape the lives of those around you and help make Arlington a better place. Visit arlingtonva.us/volunteer to learn more.
Welcome back. The budget vote that the board took at its April meeting was clearly an important one, but it was not the only action the board took. We'll take a look now at some of those other actions. Mary, I wanted to talk to you about the Wilson School and the action that the board took on the request to designate it historic.
Right.
What happened?
Well, you know, actually, to be technically correct, it was to put a local historic district on it. So I want to separate it a little bit because some of the things that happen at the building are important, and its location is important. But when you put a local historic district around something, it's almost like saying it's kind of in glass.
Oh.
You can use it, but if you want to make changes to it, there's a pretty extensive process it has to go through to get what's called a certificate of appropriateness. So some members of the community, about 12 residents down in the Roslyn area, brought this to the Historic Affairs and Landmark Review Board, which is our body that looks at these things. It had been studied once before, and in that first go-round, and everybody knows the Wilson School actually belongs to the school board. They hold that property for the purposes of delivering public education. So it had been looked at once before, and the school board had said, we choose not to sort of put it in this bubble. We think we're going to have to use this property at some point. We don't want to have to hold on to this building. The building's in rough shape. I have a daughter who went there in the early 80s when she was a 3-year-old and we had Montessori. There was regular water infiltration. It's not a building, and the school system's been using it since and taken care of it, but it's not a great building, and the original building's quite small. So what the board did was, based on the school board's request that we not designate it historic, based on our review of what was going on and with all of these parcels, we declined to put a historic district on it. We did, though, ask the manager to work with the school system and the historic preservation staff, as well as HALRB, to explore ways to tell the story of Wilson School, however the parcel ends up redeveloping.
The board also, on another school-related issue, voted to approve a contract for a turf athletic field for Washington Lee. This is a replacement of an existing field, correct?
That's correct. I was on the school board when the field went in the first time.
So tell us about this. I guess my question is both why is it being replaced and why do we have turf fields?
Well, let's start with the first one.
Okay.
People may recall, and probably we've all walked by a field where the whole middle is just dirt. Our fields are used so heavily by kids, by young adults, by seniors to play soccer and other field sports, it's very difficult to keep grass on them. So a number of years ago, 10 or 12 years ago now, the county board started trying out turf, synthetic turf in these fields, and decided to do the first couple of them actually at high schools. So Wakefield was the first one, Washington Lee was the second. And the Washington Lee field had been used only for 7 football games a year. So we were able to keep beautiful grass on it because nobody ever played. But when you put a synthetic field in, you can play anytime except if there's lightning.
Okay.
You can shovel it off and play in the winter. Get thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of playability by putting a synthetic in. So we've moved on. I think we now have 16 or 17 synthetic fields. But what we're doing in the high schools, which is important, is we're working with the school system and we're actually putting in a new pad that is designed to reduce the impact of concussions. On young people, and we are now testing the fields every year to make sure that they still have this new resiliency that people are saying you need to have in order to not have as much damage from concussion. So it'll be there for another 10 years, be playable for thousands of hours.
So worth the investment.
Totally, and if you do it on a cost per hour of play, it's one of the best deals around.
Okay, well, let's move from schools to curbs. The board actually deferred action on parking meters.
Yep.
What is the action that you deferred? Why did you defer it?
Sure. So staff brought us a proposal to look at both increasing the rate for parking meters and potentially extending the hours. Most of them, in the urban areas, the rate is $1.25 an hour. This would go up to $1.50 if we move forward. In the places where it's $1, it'd go to $1.25. We have some places at 50 and 75 cents. Those wouldn't change. We currently run till 6 o'clock at night. This is a proposal to run as late as 8. When we looked at what others were doing in the region, we had the lowest rates and we had the shortest hours. And both of those things lead to the street not turning over. And so people drive around looking for parking too much. So this is, we're trying to right size this, and it came to us late, and we thought we'll take a little more time. So really looking forward to hearing from the community what they think about these proposals.
So you'll be acting on this in May after a public hearing,
That's
right?
exactly right. Yep.
Okay. And finally, you took a kind of unusual action. You issued a proclamation for a man and a store. Can you tell us about that?
Yep. Public Shoe Store in Clarendon has been there since 1938.
Oh my goodness.
In 2 locations owned by the same family. And Doc Friedman, which is what we all call him, those of us who live in Clarendon, is retiring at about age 92, and the store is going to be closing.
Oh my goodness.
And so we took the opportunity to celebrate a little bit the constancy of this family, the role they've played in our neighborhoods and in so many families throughout the whole of Arlington and probably Northern Virginia. And Doc came to the meeting and we gave him the proclamation, and I think they're closing in December. So go get your plantar fasciitis shoes now, because I don't know who else is going to be selling those.
It's really kind of the end of an era, isn't it?
It is definitely the end of an era. I think the good news is that the building itself is historic and won't be going away, but we won't see Doc and his friends there handling thousands of pairs of shoes and fitting them on, hundreds of thousands of feet. So.
Well, I'm sure that shoe store and Doc saw a lot of changes in Clarendon through the decades.
Yeah, it's really true. He told this story of when the Metro came through. Their original store was actually at the Metro Plaza.
Oh.
And so they had to move. And he and his brother and his father were in the business, and the brother said, let's go to Parkington, that's, which is now Ballston.
Yeah.
And Dad said, no, we're going across the street. We're not leaving Clarendon. And Doc said he was the boss.
Well, that's great. I'm sure that felt good to be able to honor this businessman in that store.
It was wonderful. It really was.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again, Mary. This has been a great conversation.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Mary.
Okay. And thank you all once again for joining us for the County Board Wrap-Up. I think we all learned something about what goes into putting together the county's annual budget. And remember, if you have more questions about the topics we've discussed, email them here at atv@arlingtonva.us or tweet them with the hashtag CountyBoardWrap, and we'll try to answer them next time. See you all in May.